I didn't know. I thought all medical procedures and diagnoses were the same. Now, because of the Laura Bush Institute, I know there are differences between men and women, and I can insist on personalized care from my healthcare providers. Because diagnostic standards have historically been based on the male physiology, women, you, and the people that you care about are at greater risk. This is what the Laura W. Bush Institute for Women's Health is passionate about. If your physician is well informed, you could avoid a misdiagnosis, complications, or even a delay in life-saving treatment.
Gender bias in medicine just about killed me. When I was 40, I knew I was having a heart attack with chest pains, shortness of breath, and sweating. So I went to the ER. Over the next 4 hours, I was misdiagnosed twice, even with a blood test confirmation. It took 3 days, but even then they weren't prepared for that. So I had to come back the next day for a stent. Sex and gender differences matter.
The Laura Bush Institute is integrating sex and gender differences into healthcare curricula so future physicians and nurses get the latest information and women receive the personalized care that they deserve. We host events in communities across Texas sharing vital health information with women and girls to improve their lives mentally, physically, and emotionally. We provide fun educational programs that inspire self-confidence and personal power in young girls. We also entertain college women with events that teach self-defense, acceptance, and friendship as they navigate their college years. Our signature events across Texas bring fascinating people who inspire us and lend support to our mission and programs. Through our focus on mental health, we provide transcranial magnetic stimulation treatments for women with chronic depression and anxiety.
I no longer live with the crippling depression that I did before deciding to try Brainsway Deep TMS. Thanks to Brainsway TMS and the staff at Texas Tech University, and of course God, I sit here today with tears of joy streaming down my face as I believe I've been given a second chance of living life.
We also facilitate breast and cervical cancer screenings for uninsured women.
If it would not have been for the Laura Bush Foundation, I know for a fact that I would not have gone to get checked out, and I never would have found out that I had early stage cancer. I am cancer-free.
Your support plays a critical role. Join us. Together, we can improve the lives and health of women everywhere. Our thanks to former First Lady Mrs. Laura Bush, our National Advisory Board, our community boards and volunteers, and the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center.
Hi, and welcome. This is Feed Your Mind, Nourish Your Inner Self. It's brought to you by the Laura W. Bush Institute for Women's Health, and I'm Connie Tyne, Executive Director. We're so thrilled you could be with us today because I think we've all been trying our best to survive this very challenging time we're in. And today we brought to you two phenomenal experts who are really on the front lines of mental health these days. One is Dr. Stephanie Moses, a psychologist from the Permian Basin, and the other is Dr. Sarah Wakefield, a psychiatrist in Lubbock, Texas. We do have a chat feature on the webinar, so I know you're going to have some questions that come up along the way. So we invite you to put your questions in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them. All right, we're going to start with Dr. Stephanie Moses. She is the Associate Professor and Director of Behavioral Health in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. That is part of the Texas Tech University Health Science Center School of Medicine in the Permian Basin. So Dr. Moses, not only are you a professor, an administrator, a therapist, and a mother of 4, but you are constantly working with other people to help them with their problems. Please, how do we get started? What's the typical patient like that you're seeing these days?
It is definitely a lot, Connie, and thank you for inviting me to join this webinar to give out such vital information. So to answer your question, I am seeing definitely an increase in stress and stressors. You know, at this time, we have a lot going on between the pandemic, financial strains, the holidays coming up, physical illnesses, and the stress that comes from just managing family life and the new normal that we're living into. This is creating an increase in depression and anxiety symptoms, but then also to just dealing with emotions. Some people are just having frustration, anxiety, irritability, and are not quite sure if it's considered an anxiety condition or depressive condition. So they're coming to learn how to manage these stressors, balance life and life responsibilities, and also to understand what the differences are between stress and then when it becomes diagnosed as anxiety and depression. Anxiety is the number one mental health condition that I see, followed very, very closely by depression. And my patient population tends to be women. Part of that, I think women are just more up for talking. Women also, too, are more likely to reach out to their primary care physicians, whether that's a family doctor or an OB, and let them know some of the stress that they're under. Thereby, that way they get to me. I have the pleasure of being in the Department of Family and Community Medicine, which is primary care. The primary care doctors are writing more of the prescriptions and being the frontline treaters than some of the psychiatrists. So it's a neat intersection for me to be in that department. But to answer your question, where I'm seeing a lot of women that now are having different challenges than possibly they had prior to March. And we're trying to understand how to cope with it, what to do with it. And even for some of them, even if it should be the quote shoulds, right? Should be this be a problem? Should I be upset about this? Should I be irritable and yelling at my kids? And how do I manage this? Depression and anxiety typically hit about 1 in 5 people that we know of. I have a sneaking suspicion it might be a little bit more because those are just the ones that report it. And then fewer will come actually to a mental health professional or their physician to get help for that.
I'm sure they don't even know where to start when they walk in the door. I'm sure there's a sense of being overwhelmed. And I know as a parent that we want to help others, but we really can't do that when we're sort of falling apart ourselves. And I know the sense of being overwhelmed is probably one of the things that you have to deal with quite a lot. How do you help women manage their own sense of anger and frustration and exhaustion so that they can help their children?
That's a great question. And I think the answer in my clinical practice tends to be twofold. First, we have to recognize what the feeling is. What is the emotion versus the thought? Sometimes we confuse emotions and thoughts, and we are thinking we feel something when that's just a thought and not the feeling. So I work to identify the emotions or emotions, and at sometimes we can have several emotions that are contradicting. You know, we love our kids, but they're driving us crazy. You know, we love our husband, but if he doesn't get off the Xbox, we feel like we're going to wring his neck. And so sometimes the emotions can be contradicting. So it's understanding what the emotion is. Additionally, it's knowing that the emotion is okay. That is not the problem. It's typically how we react to the problem. And so we identify what their natural responses are to these more difficult emotions. Then what I call a difficult emotion is the sadness, the irritability, the frustration, the anger, the fear. Those are more difficult to tolerate. So we're able to identify those and the triggers. And then the second part of that is how are you managing it in your daily life? We know that a condition is a little more clinical when it's disruptive to your daily activities. Most of us can manage fairly well, even if we experience some of these difficult emotions, and even if they last. But if it's completely disruptive to where you're not able to complete tasks for you or for your family or your children, for your occupation, for some of us, it's just hard to even get out of the bed and get dressed. So when it's impacting significantly your daily life, then we know that it's probably more on the clinical end. So I diagnose based on this impact on the daily life. So we identify the emotions, we understand how it's impacting the daily life. And if it's more clinical, there might be medications that are necessary, or we do a course of the talk therapy. If it's not clinical, if it's more in the manageable range with behaviors, then we identify different behaviors that the person can do to manage that. I had one lady just recently come to me really not knowing if she should even be there. And I told her, you know what, let me be the judge if you should be there, because we all just need somebody to talk to, even support sometimes. And so she says, well, you know, I've always known that I'm an introvert, and I thought that meant I just like being at home. And she said, I never minded being at home with my husband, my children. Then I realized I like being alone, which is very different. So how do you manage that when some kids were being homeschooled, people are off of work, different challenges in finances. I had another lady come because she just had a baby. Her experience in the hospital was very different than she imagined when she got pregnant, than 40 weeks prior to her delivery. Having to deliver on her own with little to no family help and support was a different challenge. Her primary care physician just thought it was postpartum. And she was wondering if this is postpartum depression. I've never experienced it before, or could this be something very different? So it's learning and understanding within the context of what you're really dealing with and what your life is like, how we manage through these things. The lady that said, hey, I'm an introvert and I thought I liked to be with my family, I just like to be alone. We were able to really actively find some self-care, daily activities that she could put in where she had the time alone, she could decompress, because for introverts, the way that they decompress is to be alone, right? Extroverts get rejuvenated by social interactions and talking. And so the introvert extrovert work very differently. So we were able to institute some self-care things in her routine that she could do that would make her feel rejuvenated. The lady that just had the baby, it's just normalizing that her process was very, very different, and her delivery was different than she imagined. Not having help was different. So we were able to manage some of her symptoms with medication, and the others was normalizing how she's supposed to go about having this child now, where she doesn't feel comfortable putting the baby in childcare, and how she's supposed to manage work. So it was finding a balance for her so she could take care of all of her responsibilities, and both of them are doing well. There's ups and downs that come naturally, but we all have those. And I think a big part of it is normalizing the ups and downs as well that we all experience.
I really understand that. And I'm thinking along with you that part of this is also about adjusting our expectations. I think we have a set of expectations for a day and for a week and maybe for ourselves. And many of those are just, they've gone out the window. We don't get to do what we wanted to do. We don't maybe get to interact with our kids and take them places, and our kids are disappointing us. I mean, our expectations of our children, our expectations of our spouse. I mean, we've got another human being who's not used to being in the house, who may be very worried about his security, about his position. But even if the job is fairly secure, but they've sent him home for 4 or 5 months, he didn't expect to be there with other people around. And I mean, this is really tricky, isn't it?
It is. It's very tricky, and it's difficult to navigate. And when you first introduced me, you listed all of my quote unquote titles. And so I don't only get it professionally, I really understand it personally. What I think that I did that was extremely helpful for me was knowing that I could be flexible. At the end of the day, if I have a routine that was extremely important for me to stick to as a working mother. My children were out of school for 6 months, like everyone else's were. I had to figure out how to work from home, which was not, what we were typically doing with telemedicine. And then I had to adjust to homeschooling and modifying schedules. When I realized that it was okay to have a bad day and it was okay to be flexible. So if the dinner wasn't on the table by 7 o'clock and the kids ate cereal, they ate cereal one night. So I really practiced giving myself some grace as we all adjusted to this. Then we had an adjustment flowing back into the economy and back into the workforce, and increased fears and agitation with even mask wearing has become a real issue, and who's wearing masks and who's not, and the exposure. So understanding to be flexible, stick to the routine as much as possible. And I am a big proponent in self-care. Sometimes my self-care just may be in my shower, and I turn on my Alexa and I jam out to my music, and I have that 15 minutes to myself where no one is saying mom or asking where a sock is and the dogs aren't running in, and that can tend to rejuvenate me. So staying focused on being flexible and handling things that need to be handled first. Prioritizing is a key in this moment as we're juggling so many balls. Another thing that I did personally and that I am really, really emphasizing to a lot of the women I treat is just to unplug. We tend to think unplug simply means turn off the TV, and it does. But turn off the TV, turn off social media has really helped me. But I will, even after my workday is over, I will turn off the emails and the computer And sometimes I turn off from my children. I say, do not say mom for 30 minutes, give me that. And if your children are at home, it can be hard to separate that time of when you can unplug even from them. And so remember, children don't need a quantity of time, they need the quality of time. So it's okay to step away from them for 30 minutes and go and rejuvenate. And that has been extremely beneficial for me. And the ladies that I have seen that I emphasize that to, it's been very helpful to them. I had one lady who has a special needs son who's about 4 now, and he has severe autism, and she has a newborn daughter. And so she is just struggling to manage this and trying to find different diets that will work for him, because she's noticed a change depending on what he eats. We hear all of this, and it does have an impact. And then she's trying to understand, well, if I'm with the baby and I'm not giving him attention, am I doing him disservice? So we were really emphasizing and working on identifying things that she could do for self-care. And she was saying, it's been probably 3 days since I've had a real shower. And so as we were working on and identifying things at our next session, she was so excited because following the session, she was going to go get her eyelash extensions put on. And that created so much joy for her, even just to have something to look forward to, that her week was really, she reported it was a lot better because she had something that she knew was going to be for her. So these things may seem very small, but they add up and they help us manage through this difficult time. And that's what this is really about. It's understanding how to manage through this time, because this time will end, it will improve, it'll change, we'll adjust, we'll have a new normal. But what do you do until we get to that place?
That's a good point. It is true that this isn't the first pandemic. This isn't the first terrible experience that we've had as a country or as a community. We've had wars, we've had all kinds of things. And because of that, we do know things come to an end. And after the drought, we get rain. And so I guess that's probably really helpful. I was thinking about unplugging, and I was thinking about, how do you unplug your brain when you go to bed? You go to bed at night, and all the things that you didn't quite get finished with, or you think you need to do tomorrow, really flood in. Do you have any tips for getting that sleep? Because I know how important sleep is, but sometimes sleep is hard to come by.
You are so right. Sleep is our body's restorative nature to really help manage some of these stressors that we're under and help our body function properly. But it seems like sometimes we just chase it. We just can't get enough of it. And like you said, a lot of times it's because our mind is just going and going and going. I think it's important to follow a proper sleep hygiene method. Your doctors will talk to you about that, limiting caffeine, increasing workout diets, don't eat past a certain time. But one thing that I find extremely effective for the women I see, and the things that I tell the women that I see, I do them myself. That's how come I can say that they're effective. But I use a technique called thought stopping. And what that is it's intentionally controlling my thoughts, or intentional awareness to what I'm thinking. So a lot of times we may not be aware of what we're thinking, but one of the signals that I use for my own body is I will notice that I will tense up, right? My shoulders will start hurting, or my head will start hurting, or my heart will start fluttering, maybe not racing, but it's beating differently. And that's how I know that maybe my mind is doing something I need to be aware of. So in that moment, I will use my physical stimulation and triggers to say, wait, what am I thinking about? And when I am thinking about the 15 things that I need to do, or the things I didn't do, and I didn't put money on the lunch account, and I forgot to pick up the cleats for football practice, or I forgot to make a recommendation for a particular medication, if it's time for me to try to be restful and do the unplugging and go to sleep, I will say, nope, I'm not thinking about that right now. There is nothing I can do about it. If it's an emergency, if it's a patient care thing that it is an emergency, I'll get up and do it that way. It's off my mind, right? And then I will use that for the remainder of the things. But if, the money's not on the lunch account, they'll get a cheese sandwich. They'll be fine. They've had plenty of cheese sandwiches before, and sometimes even at home. And so I will say, no, I'm not thinking about that right now. And I will redirect my attention. So it's intentional thought stopping and then redirecting your attention. And I'll redirect my attention. Typically before I go to bed, I'll try to read, or, I'll watch a fun show on TV, something very light and lighthearted. Or something just of interest that redirects. And that will help stop that cycle, because when that cycle continues, we'll notice an increase in the anxiety, in the stress, And then it feels like, then what tends to stress us out is we're looking at the clock thinking, you can really look at that clock and make the countdown. Oh gosh, I only have 6 hours. Now I have 5 hours and 30 minutes. And so then that will add to the stressors. But if you stop that thought intentionally and say, no, rationalize it, it's okay, I don't need to think about that right now, and redirect your attention, that can help you in the moment.
I love the way you're forgiving yourself. You're being less, you're understanding that this is a different time, and we don't have to make the bed. We don't have to do every load of laundry the minute it hits the basket. We don't have to make the best meals we've ever made in our life. Although if you can get the kids interested in cooking, at least that gets them off the TV for a little while. I certainly would like that. One of the things that we talked about is the person who walks in and says, I don't know what I feel. I don't feel anything. That maybe they've been so overwhelmed by fear of the virus, or by fear from other things. They've sort of shut down. What do you do when someone feels that they don't know who they are?
Yeah, and I'm hearing that a lot, and it's described as maybe even autopilot, where you just kind of are just going through the motions, or just a numbness is how a lot of people are describing that feeling. And for some people, what I recommend is, you can Google the feeling chart, kind of, when you're in the hospital and have little faces with the pain level, they have that for feelings too, because sometimes you don't know what that feeling feels like, what that really means. And so those faces can kind of help guide you. On those feeling charts also, there are feelings on there that you don't even realize are feelings. And so what I would do is be very aware in the moments of, okay, I'm not really quite sure what it is. You can pull out the chart and try to identify it that way. And then maybe what's triggered that. I think it's almost like an onion. If you peel back the layers of the onion, then you're a lot closer to being able to identify it, give yourself permission to feel it, because like we said, the feelings aren't the issue, it's our response to it. And then really recognize how you're responding to that. If it is a persistent numbness, I would probably go to the doctor or a mental health professional and let us help you process through that, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, there's something going on. We just had a question about the relationship with your supervisor. So you have a job, you're supposed to be at your job, but now things are so uncertain with the kids, and some days they're not going to school and some days they are. And how do you have any recommendations for working moms who are trying to balance their careers and their kids' needs and their families' needs, how they talk to their supervisor, or if they have to choose?
Well, I think the important thing is talking, right? Talk to your supervisor, explain your situation. I hope your supervisor is approachable, but we don't all have that benefit. But I think as long as you're communicating your current challenges and even what they can expect from you going forward, that will help. I have found a lot of people are under the stress of the job, and it almost feels as though, because the majority of us are working from home, we feel like we have to do more, and that is one thing that I say, challenge that with your coworkers and your supervisor. Set out reasonable expectations for yourself and ask your supervisor, is this okay if I do this? And I am trying to manage childcare and working as well. I believe most of them will respect it. If they don't, then I would say, okay, well, what do you expect from me? And how can I help fit your vision and your goals for this quarter or this time period? And you may be able to find some common ground there. So I think the most important part is open the lines of communication. Sometimes it can be really difficult to sit down and have that conversation, especially because proximity is not there anymore. So don't be afraid to send an email or a text message. I know from my supervisor, he happens to be extremely understanding because he is a physician, so he understands this, but understanding where I am and what I'm trying to accomplish for the day, for the week, and knowing that I'm still working on projects. And he's completely satisfied. He didn't see me for a couple of months and probably wondered what I was doing and if I was slacking off. But once we did have the conversation and he saw that the things that I was working on, I was making progress, because I sent an email saying, hey, here's some updates of what I've been doing. And here are some questions that I have. And here, how would you like for this to look? Or, help me understand these barriers that I've identified. And so being able to do that. So when you when you are approaching your supervisor, have some expectations of what you can do, but then also try to find the commonality between their vision and goal for you and what's really feasible for your life.
That's great advice. Thank you, Dr. Moses. We're going to invite Dr. Sarah Wakefield in to join us now. And let me give you a little background on her. Dr. Wakefield in recent years has really, her work has primarily revolved around relational psychiatry. She's board certified in general psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and forensic psychiatry. She's chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the Texas Tech University Health Science Center School of Medicine in Lubbock, Texas. She works with graduate students and other students, but as she told me the other day, she works from kids from 20 down to the little bitty people. So it's not easy to find someone who can talk to us about the little bitty people, because they're scared and out of sorts and worried and everything, but gosh, so are the big people. So Dr. Wakefield, maybe we should start with the students, the college students that you see every day, and then we really want you to talk to us about the little people.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. It is really exciting anytime we get to talk about how to improve our coping strategies and our own mental health. It's a reminder every time I do one of these talks to myself, because we are not immune, no matter how much we know, how many books we've read or studies we've done. We are not immune to having mental health distress. And I think that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, is that oftentimes when someone is feeling distressed, immediately the anxiety comes in. Is this something that needs treatment? Is this something that I have to respond to immediately? And the first thing we have to do is realize that 100% of humans experience mental health distress, that is a normal part of the human experience, and something that we should monitor and that we should improve our coping mechanisms around, but we shouldn't hide from it and we shouldn't be embarrassed about that, because it's a normal part of the human experience at a more normal time. It's hard for me to imagine what a normal time is, because but this is absolutely not a normal time, but I'm not actually sure what a normal time is. So when we think about college students, it's really no different from what everyone else is experiencing. Our little kids, our kids in school, our parents, our moms, our grandparents. This is a weird time for everybody. Our college students are experiencing, changes in their milestones, what they thought, our first year college students, what they thought going to college was going to look like, what they thought graduation from high school was going to look like, their first dorm experience. I was talking with a mom yesterday about her child who's a freshman in the dorms, and she said, no one else is allowed in if they don't live there. And I thought, what an interesting experience when you were first going to college. I remember we weren't allowed to have, I went to a private college on the East Coast, but we weren't allowed to we had separate dorm levels based on gender. And so there might not be somebody allowed on the level on your floor, but you could always meet downstairs in the common area, and trying to navigate that practicing of life, of transitioning from the supervision of home to being an adult, and that those experiences are really being limited now. And understandably so. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be limiting these for safety reasons, but just being aware that these are changing the college experience for many of our youth. And then, am I going to go face to face? Is it how many freshmen and sophomores and other students, juniors and seniors, who are experiencing classes in a very different way than they thought they would, and trying to then navigate, what does that mean? Leaving your house, we know this, leaving your house, leaving your dorm room for anyone is a normalizing experience, right? I get up, I get dressed, I do my hair, I brush my teeth, I leave my house and I go participate in the world, and it helps us organize our day. And then we come back home and then we calm down, and then we, maybe watch a show or we have dinner. Well, when you're doing Zoom all day, or whatever platform you're using for classes and other interactions, how do you structure your day? How do you do that? And we're all learning that together, but it can be very discombobulating for us all. And especially for that college student who is just for the very first time trying to organize their day on their own at all. Now they're trying to organize it in this way without these normal or normalized checkpoints or reflection points throughout the day. Like, oh, I've walked in. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I think that's something that as parents of college students or anybody who's interacting with youth who are making a big transition like that, to be aware of, because it changes the entire experience. And we know it will change their developmental trajectory through that. I'm not suggesting it has to be terrible, but they might say, well, now I'm having to learn, in a year from now I'm having to learn what it means to navigate my morning with all these other tasks I have to do before I get out the door, because it takes longer to get in the car and drive than it does to just do my hair and get to the Zoom appointment. Or, oh, I have to put on real pants. And so I think those things we really have to expect that there will be some nuances and some additional learning. We've kind of learned how to do this, but learning as we transition back, which we will. I mean, Connie, you reflected on this, that we will not be in this boat forever. And I think that's something that we have to focus on sometimes, is that this is a time limited experience that we're having. But that there will be things that come afterwards about the transition from this period. And then there's also this associated grief that is a real experience for us all. The grief of the loss of some of these community experiences, the grief of the loss of these public milestones and the way in which we thought they were going to be done, and the grief of the loss of the expectations that you talked about. That comes with, I think that's a normal parent experience, and it's actually a normal life experience to realize that things don't always go the way that we had them planned in our mind. But this time period is like that on steroids. It's that on hyperdrive, right? Realizing that just because it's not like we expected it to be doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong, but it feels that way. That's kind of the body and the mind's initial response. Like, this isn't what I expected, so it must not be okay. It doesn't feel good to me. And so that must signal that something's wrong. And so learning how to tolerate that idea that just because it's not what I expected does not mean that it's bad. We talk about that being a growth mindset. And I wanted to highlight that here. Dr. Moses talked about that flexibility and how important that flexibility is in her life and for us all. The way that we talk to kids about it is, and adults increasingly, but is having a growth mindset. And I think that's something you can Google. There are YouTube videos on it. There are handouts, all kinds of things that you can do, but it really helps you reorient. And, my kiddos will say, well, I can't go visit my friend. And I'll say, well, you can't go visit your friend right now. You can't go visit your friend yet. It doesn't mean that you can't ever visit your friend. And you can't go visit your friend in person. What's another way that we can do that? So not stopping at the distressing statement or feeling, investigating it and saying, okay, this is the reality right this second. How can I achieve what I would like to achieve with this? Or how can I reassure myself that it's not going to be like this for forever? I think those are really important things to do, no matter what age we are, navigating life in general, and especially this time in the pandemic.
Right. Those are such good points. I was thinking about a friend of mine whose child was really happy to get to come home and do homeschooling. Didn't really like school that much anyway, but now has gotten to the point that they don't want to go back and they don't really think they have any friends anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I can't go back to school. Nobody really likes me. And I just want to stay home where I'm safe. And my mom's here, or, somebody's here with me. And how do you help a child who's decided they like being isolated? They don't want to go anywhere.
I think that's more common for many of us. We like to be comfortable. We like where we are and we like to be comfortable. The first thing I would say is that that's a fairly normal experience for many children, not for all children. There are many children who at the end of the summer are like, let's get back to school. I can't wait to see my friends. What am I going to wear? But there is another group of children that is still in the normal spectrum of emotions who say, yeah, I really like how the summer went. I don't really want to go back. I don't want all those rules and everything that I have to do in that way. Kids, I'm more sensitive to the comments that children make or that my peers make. So I would say that feeling in general is not abnormal. For many kids, it's part of the normal spectrum of emotions for people. During this time, it has normalized the ability to do that at abnormal times. So we expect that at the end of the summer. We expect that at the end of the holiday breaks. But right now, it's, if they're going to transition back, it's at the end of the 9 weeks. I'm dealing with this at a weird time. So I've experienced this. I have kiddos at school, and they will see other friends who are either on quarantine or they've chosen to stay home, and they know that they're virtual learning, and they say, well, why can't I do that? Because their expectation is going to be, well, I get to hang out and play video games all day at my house. And so that sounds much more fun than what I'm doing at school. And I also have seen kiddos who are at home who say, what is it going to be like at school? And those do tend to be our kiddos who are a little bit more on the anxiety spectrum, whether or not it meets criteria for any kind of treatment. I say all of us have concern and worry. That is a normal part of the human experience, and it is on a continuum. But for those kiddos who seem to have more worry, seem to have more distress when they're thinking about changing their situation, that's an opportunity for their parent to really normalize that feeling for them and say, instead of say, oh, it's going to be fine. It's totally fine. Everything's going to be great. You have friends there, and talk them into it. Ask them, what's going on? What do you like about being home? And try to find the ways in which you could mimic that experience at school. Try to find, when we have kids transitioning back to school, which we do for many reasons. There are kids throughout, way before the pandemic, who have been home because of medical reasons or other things for extended periods of time. And when they're thinking about going back to school, they have questions of, well, where will I use the restroom for some of my kids, or who will I go to if I feel sick again? Or what do I do in those time periods? Those are all valid questions. And many of our kiddos at home right now may say, well, it wasn't safe for me to be at school before. Why is it safe now? What is it going to look like? Am I going to be able to see my friends? Am I going, what is it going to look like to walk in the hall? How will we eat lunch? So a lot of those questions are swirling around in their brains. But unlike adults, but many adults can't organize those thoughts very well in our heads either. Sometimes we get distressed and don't realize all the things that are swirling around in our brains. But when a child is having that, that's really difficult for them to parse out that information and say, Mom, what I'm really worried about is if I get to eat lunch with my best friend anymore, or what that looks like. What I'm really worried about is if I go to school and I get sick, or if I go to school and you go back to work and you get sick. I saw all this stuff on the news. So asking them those questions, like, what do you like about being at home? What are your concerns about going back to school, and helping them navigate that? I like to think about with parents, for myself and for parents that I work with, I say, our job as parents is not to make decisions for our kids. It's not to create a perfect world for our kids. Our job as parents is to help our children learn how to make choices. That's it. That's our whole job in the world. To keep them safe when they're little. But you can only keep them safe for a very short amount of time, right? And then you don't see them all day, every day. And so our job as parents is to help our children learn how to make choices. So help them investigate what it is that they're worried about, what it is that they like about being comfortable at home, and how they can make choices to make that transition easier. Now, what I would say is, if you don't have to say, oh, well, you get to make the decision about whether you stay home or go back. Often, even at my house, I'll say, well, this is what is going to happen. Unless there's another, there may be reasons that I don't understand that we would make a different decision as a family. But Dad and I have decided, this is what works for our family right now. Tell me what your concerns are about that. Tell me what you're thinking. And then we have that discussion. Because I also believe that while our job as parents is to help our children learn how to make choices, it is too much to give them every opportunity for every choice, and that you have to make sure that's developmentally appropriate.
That sounds great. And that brings up the ever popular question of co-parenting. What if you suspect the children are not getting the same message from both parents? or they're getting conflicting messages, or one parent seems to be more punitive and one's, a little more lenient, and that can be very confusing to kids, right?
It can be confusing for kids, but it's actually more the norm that it's not. I mean, it would be lovely. It would be absolutely lovely if we all parented the exact same way and in what I call the firm kind parenting model. It's the most evidence-based parenting model. Sometimes we call it parenting with love and logic. Like, these are the rules. The rules exist because I love you. The rules could be changed if you have a valid argument or if there's a reason, but these are the rules. It would be great if we all parented like that. I can tell you, I've read all the books. I've written some of the chapters. I have taught this for a long time. I do not parent in a loving a firm kind way 100% of the time. Right? Like, I have difficulties. I get stressed out. Sometimes my husband does a better job of it than I do. Sometimes I do a better job than he does. The really important thing is to first realize that your kids are super resilient. We want to be kind overall, but if they know they're loved, they're okay. If they know they're loved, they're pretty much okay. I love this concept, and it helps me feel better a lot, but it is evidence-based as well. And it's called the good enough parent. It originally was called the good enough mother because the research was all about mothers. But now we refer to it as the good enough parent, and that the good enough parent is actually the best parent for the child. That the perfect parent who does things perfectly all the time, first of all, doesn't exist. But for those children that, have that experience, or for the mom or dad who feel like that's what they have to be all of the time, that it actually does not allow the child to learn to adapt and to cope. That this idea of perfect parenting, sometimes people talk about it as like lawnmower parenting, I pave the way for you, or snowplow parenting, that perfect parent who responds appropriately to every single thing and the child doesn't get distressed is actually worse for the child in the long run. They have more anxiety and they have more risk of depression and anxiety in the future, and possibly a higher rate of suicide. We're investigating this right now. That we don't want to be perfect parents. We want to be good enough parents. And that is very reassuring to me when I know, like, you know what? My husband just did that, and that is not the way that I would have handled that. Or I just did that, and it's not the way, if I was in my thinking brain, that I would have wanted to handle that. And I think, what a great opportunity for my children to learn how to adapt and know that I'm not perfect and they don't need to be perfect. And so the other thing that I would recommend is being really open to apologize to yourself and to your children and to your spouse, and to say, I was really overwhelmed today. And normalize the idea that you can sometimes get upset, and that doesn't have to be that you're a horrible person or that something's wrong, but that you were overwhelmed. It's also a signal to do something about it, to nurture yourself and to cope and to think about that. And you can share that experience with your children. That is a normalizing experience to say, Mommy realized that I have loaded my plate down with too many things, or that there are too many things on my plate. Maybe I didn't choose this, but all of these things are on my plate right now. And it is difficult for me to navigate all of those. So what I'm going to do to take care of myself are these three things. That is a fantastic, it's probably the best lesson you could ever teach your children, that when you're distressed, you take care of yourself, not I can handle everything, everything's okay. But I don't think I answered your question either about your spouse. I think we are all in a very difficult situation right now. And that self-compassion, but also compassion for each other. And that idea of being able to say, hey, do you need some time? Do you need to get out of the house? Do you need to take a drive? How can you, instead of responding, I really didn't like what you did with the kids, you need to read this book, we need to get on the same page right now, say, hey, it seems like I know I've experienced this. It seems like you might be. What can I do to support you through this time too?
That sounds very reasonable. Thank you. Let's invite Dr. Moses to come back and join us. And we'll have, I'll share some of the questions that have come in while you all have been talking. And then we'll just let you take turns, or you can take turns, or you can both answer or give whatever input you like. This is an interesting one. As a parent, am I hurting my children when I talk to others about the pandemic and the seriousness of it, and try to, do all these precautions? Am I scaring them too much? and how much should they know?
Dr.
So,
Wake,
yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that one at the beginning. I think you do have to think developmentally appropriately, right? That it is not what are they able to handle, and that's different based on age. It's also different based on child. It's different based on birth order. Like if you're a third kid, you can handle things much differently sometimes than you can if you're a first kid in the family. So your children, number one. But I would say a couple of different things. One, anxiety comes when we have distress that we can't do anything about. Right? Like we have all of oh my gosh, all of these terrible things are happening and I can't do anything. I physically can't do anything about it. I can't intervene right here. And so for us too, we have to remember that as adults, that if we are just getting information that we actually can't respond to, why is that valuable to us? It's not valuable to us. Now, if it changes your actions, if it helps you remember to wear a mask or to not cough on someone or to report your symptoms or to stay home if you're feeling worse, then that is a reason to have that anxiety. Normative anxiety is supposed to provoke a reaction, an action to prevent the thing that you're worried about from happening. Now, if you just get information that you cannot act on, that just swirls around in your brain and makes you anxious for no reason. So when I think about what to share with my children, I think, number one, can they do anything about this? Is this help? Am I going to teach them something to do? Is this important? And some things, yes. I say, I need to explain to you why, even though no one likes wearing a mask anywhere, that we need to wear a mask when we go into the store because they don't want to wear. I mean, but I need to tell you why. So you need some information instead of just, I told you so. And if there's a family member who's sick, I'm also an advocate of not shielding children from information, helping them navigate that information. But if it's truly not going to make any difference to their day-to-day life, it's not going to provoke some action to protect themselves or to help them cope with something, it is not appropriate to just share that information. It's also not appropriate for us to hear that information. So just turn it off. You don't need that. If it's not going to help you cope or do something different to protect yourself, you don't need that information. But then you also always want to be the person who's answering your children's questions. So if they have a question, they are ready for an answer. And I think that's always really important, that a lot of parents will say, I don't know if I'm supposed to answer this. I'm like, if they asked you a question, you need to answer it. Now, you can decide, I always say, answer it in as limited fashion as possible. And if they ask another question, then you answer that question. You don't have to give them everything that's in your brain right up front.
And I'll just add to that a little bit if I can. I always like to know with my kids, well, what do you know about it? Because they're getting information from their friends, from their teachers, from social media that they have that I'm not supposed to know that they have, and so they're getting a lot of different information. And so it will help me answer their questions and know how to reveal the information or how deep to go even by knowing where they are. So it's kind of just meeting them where they are. And then, like Dr. Wakefield said, then framing it in the most appropriate way.
That sounds like good advice.
And let me add one more thing, that it is absolutely okay to say you don't know. Because if you don't know, now don't lie to them. You need to be the person who does not lie to your children, but they need to trust that when they come to you with a question that you are going to give them as much information as you have, or that, you're going to answer it. But I have parents who say, well, I don't know what to say to them. And I say, well, say, I'm not sure how to answer that question right now. I don't know. And that also teaches them that you don't have to have every piece of information to feel okay. Like it's okay to not have all of the answers right now. Or you can look it up together.
I love that. And that takes away that pressure to be the perfect parent who always has the perfect answer at the perfect time and knows just what to say. So bringing that along, let's talk about strategies. I think we even have a handout or a slide that we can put up that you guys could discuss about just some very practical strategies for helping us maintain our sanity as we go through these challenging times.
So initially, taking care of yourself is so important. And in the first part of our discussion today, I kind of alluded to some of this. And, it's going to look different for each of us because we don't all relish off of the same things. But, when you're on a flight and they say if something were to happen, the pressure changes in the airplane, put your oxygen mask on before you put it on your child. And for a lot of us that are moms or caretakers, we find that to be a little counterintuitive, but it is so important to first take care of yourself. Can we go back to that first slide? I'm sorry. I'll talk through it really quickly. The next thing is to develop and stick to a routine, whether you're working from home, you're back in your office, or your work is at home, meaning you are the home, the main person taking care of the home and the children. Have a routine that you're doing that you stick to. The reason why this tends to be important is that when we know what to expect next, it reduces our anxiety, and that helps for our children too. Be flexible in your routine, but have a general idea. When you feel kind of unorganized and pulled in so many different directions, that will end up increasing some of the stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. And if you're like me, then you won't do anything at all and nothing gets accomplished when I'm too overwhelmed. Be social is a great one. Right now, we're having to be creative in different ways of being social. Video conferencing has become our major way of communicating. That's what we're doing even right now, because I'm sure this may have been an in-person event a year ago. But even being able to see someone's reaction and their nonverbals makes you feel connected in a different way. I was planning to, go home, which is in Dallas, for the Thanksgiving holiday and hopefully see some of my friends that live there and definitely see my family. And because of the virus, we're not able to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner via Zoom. My food's probably going to be terrible because I don't cook and I let my mom cook, but we'll do that. That way we'll feel engaged and we'll feel a little more together than we would if I was just, here with the kids. Setting boundaries will be extremely important as well. Now, setting boundaries is going to be in a variety of different ways. We often tend to feel the need to say yes all the time, and even more so now because we are parenting out of guilt. When we're at home and we should be working, we're guilty for not accomplishing all of our tasks. We feel guilty for, not petting the dog as much as we should, but set appropriate boundaries as far as what is feasible for you to do with whether it's your children, your spouse, and even yourself. Don't overload yourself, don't overextend yourself. Unplugging, we talked about before, that is from all forms of media, even from certain people in your life, you may need to unplug. The holidays are coming up and the holidays tend to be challenging for a lot of people because of the family stress. So some people may feel perfectly great that they can't go home for the holidays, but definitely find ways and moments to unplug, whether it's in the shower or just any type of decompression that you can get, finding that time away. You are your own advocate. And so if you have to continue to tell your family members over and over, this is what I need, please do that. Focus outward. This is one of my favorite ones. We're in a society now that everything is about us. We're posting on social media about us and how great we are and how great our families are. And we have this need to promote ourselves as so wonderful. And so we do a lot of focusing inward. We think about what people are thinking of us and perceiving of us. When you focus on someone else, helping someone else, brightening their day by even giving a compliment, telling them, that you're proud of what they did or their effort was wonderful or they look amazing or whatever it might be, that tends to really help them. Even if, you can go as far as volunteering. When you focus on someone else, that reduces a lot of your stress, and it also really will help you be grateful. Gratitude goes a long way in managing stress as well. And the last but not least, it's okay to not be okay. We all have bad days, pandemic or not, social injustices or not, we all have bad days. We wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Give yourself permission just to have a bad day, own it, and then make sure you don't get stuck in it. Say tomorrow or next week will be better.
Fantastic. I think we've just about covered this. Is that the last slide that we had, the last handout?
We have a couple of more. I don't know if we have time to get to them.
One more.
Yeah, I think I can really quickly review. It's a little, the second one.
Yes, the second one down.
Yeah, there we go. So this first one is really just an acronym to help us do exactly what Dr. Moses was just telling us to do. So RAIN is when you're having distress, instead of the judgment that comes with that, because, oh my gosh, I'm not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect mom. I'm not a perfect wife. I'm not a perfect whatever it is. Like, erase that. I mean, we please think I'm good enough. That is what my children actually need. I'm good enough. But I want you to think about this RAIN acronym. So first of all, you recognize when you are feeling distressed, instead of judging yourself, recognize that it's distressed, that you were feeling distressed about something. And then the A is accept it. I is really investigate it. So what's going on? What is going on with me that I'm feeling like this? And then the N is the nurture. So nurture yourself. And Dr. Moses talked all about those and all kinds of awesome ways you could do that. And that's different for every single person. One of the things, and several of these are evidence-based recommendations really from the work and the analysis of Dr. Laurie Santos. So she's a psychologist up at Yale. I would recommend that you Google her or follow her happiness podcast or do those things. I think this is great. But one of my favorite ones is check your reference points. And I'm going to tell a quick little story here to elucidate this. But my windshield, I went and met we quarantined enough. My mom was missing her grandbaby so much. And so we met her halfway between here and Dallas. So I'm in Lubbock, so that she could spend some time with the kids. And on the way there, I was on this backcountry road and someone pulled in front of me and my windshield had 7 different rocks thrown at it and broken all over the place. That's not even the worst part. So we get there, I get home. I don't have the kids for a week. It was amazing. My husband and I were like, oh, you're a real person. Oh, you're not just a dad. You're not just a mom. Hi, I remember you. It was fantastic. I went and picked up my kids. I was driving one to a baseball game and my husband got my windshield fixed in that amount of time, 2 days. It was amazing. Another rock hits my windshield. And I thought, this is crazy. And I said to Eli, my 9-year-old, I said, I wish I wouldn't have gotten my windshield fixed. This is terrible. I wouldn't have to get it fixed twice. If I had known this was going to happen, I would have just waited and not gotten my windshield fixed. And he said, but Mom, what if, because it was so broken before, what if that was the break that shattered your windshield and really hurt us? Like, at least we're not hurt. It's just a windshield. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I must be doing something right, because he just changed the reference point. My reference point was having to fix my windshield twice. His reference point was something much worse. And so it made our situation feel much better. So changing your reference points and checking what you're referencing with social media is terrible about. Because my favorite thing is reminding ourselves that we on social media, we're comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. And so our reference points are totally skewed. So check your reference points is really, really important. Be grateful. As Dr. Moses said, there is tons of information about this. We have a pumpkin sitting in the middle of our dining room table that we write on every day with a permanent marker about things we're grateful for. It totally immediately changes your mindset. And there's tons of evidence behind that. Exercise, very, very helpful. Sleep, Dr. Moses has already talked about that a lot. I wanted to advocate for an app that's free and available. It's called CBTI Coach. You can track your sleep in there, but really what I love about it is it has all these techniques. It has mindfulness techniques. It has guided imagery techniques. It has how to shut your mind off, all these things about sleep. It is free. It's fantastic. So do that. And then if you really can't shut your mind off about the things you need to do, and you just have to put that somewhere, I use the AnyDo app. And I have that connected to my administrative assistant as well. And so I'm like, I'm going to put this in because I'm so afraid I'm going to forget to do this. I'm going to put this on this list, and I know it will trigger to somebody who will help me remember to do it. So that's really important. I think there are tons of things we could tell you about, but hopefully you've gotten some great ideas today. And remember that we do not have to be perfect, because that is unattainable.
That's the best news of all. So it really is. So thank you, Dr. Wakefield. Thank you, Dr. Moses. I think we'd all like to spend the afternoon. I wish we could sit around in a circle and just really share our hearts and just get more tips, but we're so thankful for the advice you've given us today. I want to let everyone know that this is recorded, and so we'll have it on our YouTube channel in a day or so. And also on our YouTube channel is our previous webinar with Holly Rowe when we discussed skin cancer, and we had Dr. Michelle Tarbox, the dermatologist, who really filled us in. As I continue my commercial, I'll say December 10th is our third and final Feed Your Mind seminar, and we're going to be talking about nourishing your body and how the foods that you eat and the foods that you feed your children has a huge impact even on their endocrine system. So it impacts not only their pre-diabetes or pre-obesity or anything like that. It actually changes their blood chemistry and how they think and perform. And so we just really want to connect the body and the mind in our final episode. Thank you all for being with us today. You've been just great. And please check our laurabushinstitute.org website anytime. We have tons of resources, and we will put either, if you didn't get the resources you needed in the chat, then we can send out these tips on an email to you.
Connie, I'm getting a visual over here to repeat the name of those apps. So I wanted to do that really quickly, although we can also send them out. So it was the CBTI. It stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia, but it's just CBTI Coach is the sleep app. The other one is the AnyDo, ANYDO, just AnyDo. And it's just a great, I don't know, it's how I have all my tasks organized for the things I need to do and how I can share them with all the other people who can help me get them accomplished.
That sounds great. Well, we just wish everyone the very best as you work to cope with these challenging times. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and we hope that your Thanksgiving dinner is good enough, because that's the best I can get from mine too. So thanks very much, and we'll see you in
Thank you so much.
Thank you.